Hi everyone, and welcome to this video on how I achieved all A stars at GCSE. I also received the Colin Pond Scholarship for Academic Excellence after outstanding achievement at GCSE Level, having received some of the highest GCSE results in my borough. I ended up going on to study law at Oxford University. In this video, I'll walk you through what I studied, how I revised, and the strategies I used throughout the year to stay on top of things and get the best results I could. Before we dive in, I just want to quickly tell you how we can support you at EasyUniPrep. We specialise in helping students like you prepare for university applications, not just when you're in Year 13, but well before that. I know for many of you, university might feel a long way off, especially if you're currently in Year 11 or about to start the year. But here's the thing, what you do now is what sets you up for success later. Your GCSE results, your early work experience, how you explore your interests, it all lays the foundation for a strong university application. And that's exactly what most people overlook. At EasyUniPrep, we help you get ahead by building that foundation early. So when the time comes to make your applications, you're ready and confident. So for example, we provide Career Essentials reviews, where we review your CV, cover letter, or LinkedIn profile, providing specific and general feedback on the structure and content of those application resources. This is to ensure that we're maximising your chances of securing valuable work experience. And that's so important because that's what you're going to be including when applying for university in your personal statements. We also have online courses. I think the most beneficial ones for you at this stage would be our online courses on finding work experience and maximising work experience opportunities. And we also have a blog where we provide a lot of insight into the whole university application process, as well as a lot of free resources throughout the year that are really beneficial. So here's a quick look at my GCSE results. I got a grade 9 in English language and maths, an 8 in English literature, and A stars in all my other subjects, including history, psychology, French, and the 3 sciences, so biology, chemistry, and physics. It was definitely the result of consistent effort and planning, but also working smart, not just hard. I was actually part of the very first cohort to experience the new 9-to-1 grading system. That's why I have that sort of mixture of A star and grades, numbered grades, essentially. They only introduced it for English and maths initially as a trial run. This meant all my other subjects were still graded using the traditional A star to G system. So my main focus throughout Year 11 was understanding what I was being taught and what I needed to know for my exams. I didn't want to just memorise facts for the sake of it. I tried to really get to grips with the topics, especially in subjects like maths, psychology, and the sciences. If I didn't understand something, I asked my teacher straight away or made a note to go back and research it. I never let that confusion over a specific topic or module build up because I knew that would then impact everything else that I learned afterwards. So it was this mindset that helped me build a really strong foundation in all of my subjects, which made revision later on so much easier because I actually understood everything, which then made memorising everything easier. It also meant that I was not leaving any learning last second before my exams, but I was actually reviewing everything that I was learning myself. I also did not just focus on my homework, so the tasks that I was given by my teachers. I would get my homework done quickly, so then I could study more freely without the pressure of having to have something done by a certain deadline. And what that meant for me was creating flashcards, making revision notes, things I was not told explicitly to do, or was not actually homework that was given to me by teachers, but it was rather tasks that I self-assessed and knew that I wanted to do because they would help me when the exams eventually came round. So when it came to actual revision, I tried to make everything as visual and manageable as possible. So I made tons of mind maps, flashcards. Now, I'm not the most creative person. I don't really use color coding when it comes to my notes. I know maybe perhaps some of you watching love that sort of thing, which is fine. But some people may not sort of feel like color coding or spending time doing that is beneficial to them. So for me, I'd only limit myself to sort of a yellow or orange highlighter to highlight the main headings, but that was it. But the flashcards and the mind maps were really beneficial. So I made flashcards for science subjects using notebooks. I would write the question on one side of the page and then the answer on the other. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can also just use digital flashcards, for example, using Cram or Quizlet. But I find writing things down really helped me with memorization. These tools help turn big chunks of information into something I could actually understand, remember, and actively recall. So sometimes I would make mind maps to see the links between all the information I had learnt and help simplify all of that information. Sometimes I would make revision folders. I would get a few folders, hole punch the pages with my notes, and put the notes in so that everything was organised and categorised. For example, I'd use dividers in my folders. Alternatively, you can get your notes and use treasury tags to hold them together. It is useful to use folders as you can then put in key worksheets or notes from school into your own notes you've made from home, meaning you have all the important information you need for revision in one place. The key for me was making my revision materials engaging, not boring. If you enjoy using your resources, you're more likely to actually use them consistently and remember the information. So, passive recall is when you just reread your notes, highlight textbooks, or watch videos without really testing yourself. It feels productive initially because you're going over the content, but your brain isn't actually being pushed to retrieve the information. So, over a longer period of time, that information just won't stick in your mind as well. Active recall, on the other hand, is when you force your brain to bring the information out without looking. So, this retrieval process has been scientifically proven to strengthen memory pathways, making it much more likely you'll remember important information in the exam. So, active recall basically includes all the things I just mentioned. Making little revision folders, mind maps, and flashcards, that's all helpful. My advice would be to try and make these throughout the year. So, for example, if you've got a mock exam coming up, trying to make some sort of flashcards or revision folders for that mock exam, which you actually end up using before your real exams. And that's better than just making all those revision resources to the last second before your real GCSE exams, because then you'll just be giving yourself quite a lot to do, and that can be stressful. I think it's easier to explain revision techniques by actually visually showing you the real methods I used. So luckily, I actually kept a lot of my GCSE materials, so you can actually see the kinds of revision techniques I used. So, first of all, as I said, I used a lot of flashcards. I used flashcards for pretty much every single subject, but especially for the sciences, English literature, and maths. So, in terms of how I actually started creating the flashcards and gathering that information, what I would do is once I had completed a topic in a subject and I'd gone through the relevant textbook chapter, I would then go through all that information, so both from the textbook and from school notes, and then I would condense all that information into flashcards. So I'd pick out the most important pieces of information that I really needed to remember for my exams. So this was helpful as it, number one, ensured I condensed everything I had learnt into bite-sized chunks. Two, it helped me actually go through the information again and ensure I understood everything. And three, obviously the flashcards were really helpful when it came to going over information and memorising before my exams. I wouldn't actually only include information for that topic, so descriptive bits of information, but I would also include exam tips and tricks that I had learnt during any mock exams I had completed. So whether that was things that had gone wrong or questions that I knew would probably come up again because they usually did, or any feedback that I was given by my teachers, I'd actually turn that into a flashcard as well. In terms of actually creating the flashcards, you really don't need anything fancy at all. So in my case, I would just cut up plain or coloured A4 paper into smaller squares. I'd hole punch the corners and I'd connect everything together using treasury tags, which you can get cheaply on Amazon or just ask your teachers. Alternatively, you can get cheap A5 notebooks and then write a question on one side of the page and the answer on the other. I also used crayon to make digital flashcards, but I really enjoyed writing out my flashcards the old-fashioned way because I found putting pen to paper helped with my active recall later on. And it also meant I was focusing on the most important information only, as I can only physically write so much. A little tip for those doing English literature, which is everyone, something that was so unbelievably helpful for me with my English literature flashcards was making flashcards where I selected the most important quotes in reading. So for instance, I've got examples here from A Christmas Carol, I've got examples here from Sheila Burling, a specific character and an inspector calls. I've got flashcards on Romeo and Juliet. What I did, I'd pick the most important quotes, so quotes I'd want to remember for the exam, and then I would annotate around that quote as much as I could. Because this helped me memorize the quotes, but also the different ways in which I could analyze the quotes, which is obviously so important in terms of exam technique and strategy. So moving on to the next revision technique, I also made mind maps. So here are 2 mind maps that I made for psychology specifically. The way I would make my mind maps is I would go over all the information first, both from my own notes, any textbooks, school notes, my own research, and I would then just from memory make the mind map. I loved this technique as I would test how much I could remember, but also at the same time I'd be displaying the information in a way I knew would help me memorize it during the exams. I was also able to visually see links between the information. I would also test myself to see how much I could actually fit into one A3 page. And that's a really good technique actually, because you're making sure you're only keeping information, which is the most crucial and vital pieces of information to memorize. You can just ask teachers for A3 paper and then go ahead and make your mind maps. So finally, another revision technique was my little condensed notes or revision booklets. I would make these little revision booklets for some subjects, and they would include all the relevant facts, so the descriptive information that I would need to memorize. So for maths, that would be formulas, for example. But also, most importantly, a little tip that I would have for you guys is I would include exam questions, which I had noticed would pop up frequently. So that's more the case for maths, I would think, but you could do that for English as well with essay questions. I would write down the question and then show my working out, or sort of my bullet points, so that when I was revising, I'm not only going through the information I need to memorize, but I'm also going through exam technique and I can see common questions and how I should be answering them. I would also use folders to organize my ideas. So I'd put all the information and notes into neat folders, which I would then go over during my revision period. Practice really was everything. I did as many past papers as I could get my hands on, and not just near sort of GCSE exam period, but throughout the year. But most importantly, I didn't just complete them. I also looked closely at the mark schemes to see what examiners were actually looking for. So I'd practice under strict exam conditions and then spend even more time analysing the mark schemes. After doing several papers, I started noticing patterns. Certain questions over the years would appear frequently, just with slightly different wording. This then helped me predict what might come up and prepare accordingly. And also, as we spoke about earlier, any common questions that would recur very frequently, I would then include in my revision notes, alongside a model answer based on those mark schemes. The mark schemes were like cheat sheets. They told me the exact phrases and concepts that would earn marks. For example, in history and psychology, I noticed that really frequently certain types of questions repeated often, just worded slightly differently. For English, I would think about how I could adapt an essay I had already written for a different style of question. I'd make up my own questions and I'd practice bullet pointing what I would include for the answer. Another piece of advice would be to make sure you are printing out the specification for every subject you are studying. You need to make sure that everything on there is ticked at the end, so that you don't have any gaps in your knowledge and you know you've covered everything for that subject. The specification lists every topic, skill, and assessment objective you need to know for that GCSE subject. It literally tells you what will and won't be tested in the exam. So I would use a specification to organise my revision notes or flashcards. The headings in my notes would revolve around what was mentioned in the specification for each subject. Your teachers are also literally your greatest resource, so use them strategically. I made it a habit to ask questions regularly, not just when I was completely confused about something or last minute. I also attended every single revision session they offered, even if I felt confident about the topic, just in case something new popped up. Most importantly, I actually acted on their feedback. When they marked my work, I'd study their comments and make sure I understood how to improve, and I'd also sometimes include the most important feedback that I received as part of my revision notes. Also, don't be shy about asking for extra worksheets or practice questions either. Most teachers are more than happy to help. YouTube honestly was also a fantastic resource for me. There are so many brilliant GCSE revision channels out there. I use them for science, English language techniques, French listening practice. I've included a few YouTubers that I particularly used on this slide. Sometimes hearing a topic explained in a different way just made it click. It was also helpful for topics where my classroom notes weren't enough, or I just needed a fresh perspective or explanation of a topic that I was really struggling with. So, to wrap up, here are my top tips for getting fantastic GCSE grades. First, always prioritise understanding over memorisation. It takes longer initially, but saves you so much time in the long run. And it also makes it so much easier to memorise if you actually understand a concept. Second, make your revision visual and active. Mind maps, flashcards, and diagrams aren't just pretty, they're scientifically proven to improve your memory. Thirdly, treat past papers like the key resource that they are. Complete them regularly throughout the year, and don't forget to check the mark schemes. And also make sure to print the specification for each subject, as this is one of your most important resources. Also, ask for help as soon as you need it, and don't be afraid to speak up if you don't understand something. And finally, make the most of free resources like YouTube to reinforce your knowledge, or where you need an additional explanation of something you're really struggling to grasp. Thank you so much for watching, and if this video helped you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more tips and university application advice. I'll be posting videos analysing my personal statement and what I actually did to get into Oxford University next. Drop any questions you have at all, whether it's about the GCSE process or about applying to university, in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.